Good afternoon, sisters and brothers. It's a privilege for me to be here and to respond to Dr. Gorrell's paper. It's been a very stimulating reading for me. My response to this significant topic will invite us to reflect on the subtlety of technology and its significance for Christians in the 21st century, to make sense of its definition, practiced for the sake of human flourishing. Building on Dr. Delio's assertion that technology, I quote, technology is neither good nor bad, the value it has is the value we give it to it. And this will frame my response to Dr. Gorrell's presentation. First, allow me to bring a gender perspective. This is a topic that I research. The Adam myth supported a distorted idea of technology as a means to restore the male from his fallen state. An imitation of the male reduced the female, listen carefully, males, to a secondary role, which appears to be normative for religion and science alike, no difference. Just think about our church life. The restrictions and impediments we put to the female. As we have witnessed and participated in this conference, a promise of diffusing the male captivity of technology and religion is on the rise, and I do believe that. Women scholars have enlightened us with substantive paradigms in describing the shape of Christian witness in a technological era. And I want to acknowledge Dr. Campbell. I want to acknowledge Dr. Chung. I want to acknowledge Dr. Delio, who's not present. Dr. Gorrell, I acknowledge you. I acknowledge Dr. Gilbertson for your presentation. I acknowledge Dr. Herzfeld and Dr. Schnichter. Sorry if I mispronounced it. They do a lot with my last name, same thing, so it's all right. I want to acknowledge that, my sisters and brothers, that we are disarming the power of the male captivity of technology and religion. I commend the organizers, Dr. Calloway, Dr. Bolger, our Dean, Amos Young, for changing the model of today's missiological engagement in a society immersed in degrading the other, especially the female, people of color, on many fronts. Second, I cannot stay away from the struggle of power because it's a topic I research, because it's inherent to our human nature. Men and women in this place, here, we are power seekers. And in the process, each has turned against the other. This exposition on the quest to become more human is the first step, in my perspective, toward an assessment of power deep-seated, deep in the transhumanist movement, as we have heard. I ascertain that this could inform our Christian witness as we behold and tell the promise of a better life with God's hope in a fragmented and divided world that we live in. In a historical context, the Enlightenment opened a path to the concept of transhumanism as a synthesis of avoidance of powerlessness and suffering. It becomes obvious through the intersection of culture, in particular American pop culture, philosophy, and sociology, that there are threads of dynamic insights informing how a person interprets the idea of living beyond one's limit. As Dr. Gorrell elaborated on big picture questions, it is critical to acknowledge that humans incessantly seek meaning and purpose for their existence. On this premise, I want to provide a philosophical collision between a philosopher like Nietzsche and the anthropologist Ernest Becker. They both inform and contributed to the synthesis of transhumanism, and I want to add that to your suggestion, Dr. Gorrell, that the fear of suffering is what moves many of us. Dr. Gorrell has invited us to critically consider how Christians today can witness to the challenges from both points of view, power-seeking and the denial of death. For Nietzsche, the defeat of the moral conceptions of the Almighty elevated the male hubris. Listen, the male hubris, with a formulation of what he coined the rule of the Übermensch, Superman. Nietzsche defied the idea of the divine as the main source of all things. He argued that the evolving process of humans, he refers to mankind, okay, because he was very, very male-centered and chauvinist, dwells on the idea of the dominant one who excels in intelligence, masculine prowess, and longevity. The challenge for us as Christian Techno-Sapiens has to do as to how and to who we ought to respond in the light of the human struggle for power and domination, putting in Nietzsche's terms. While Nietzsche has contributed to a human-driven view of power for control and hierarchy, Ernest Becker goes deeper by unveiling humanity's deepest fear of death in his magnum opus, The Denial of Death. Interestingly, the central theme of Dr. Gorrell's presentation dealt with the human quest to become more human. In such an endeavor, humans throughout the ages have embraced the way of technologies in their creative actions. Dr. Gorrell's central argument posits that the central role of Christian witness in a new era where the intersection of historical data, ethics, culture, theology, and missional praxeology constructs information that should inform our conversations. This conference has captured this endeavor very well, and I'm proud of that. Curiously, I noticed that the transhumanist movement has a large non-religious audience. It also invites us Christians to think and consider its possibilities. Conservative and liberal Christianity is open to converse and engage the proposal of transhumanism. Perhaps it is embedded in our innate need to control the length of our existence, counter our human suffering, pain, as well as more opportunities to influence one's cultural and generational context. As I reflect on the significance of technologies, I cannot escape from what the scriptural witness has led for us to consider. Aligned with Dr. Delio's premise about the neutrality of technology, the human condition plays an important role in the dilemma of the transhumanism faces. Be aware, my sisters and brothers, that technologies at times have transcended and adapted to diverse cultures. It is an inherent trait of human creativity. There are technologies or tools that humans use and abuse for selfish and exploitative reasons, as we have heard yesterday and today. Playing God and disobedience. Technologies can derail us into acts of disobedience as humans pretend to playing God. A challenge that Christians in the transhumanist movement must be very cautious about this. Walter Brueggemann defines disobedience as the human attentiveness to cultural scripts that entices the human heart to consume, dominate, and grasp anything for one's private and individual need. Rather than listening to the voice of the Spirit in scriptures, humankind becomes mere consumerists of information for the sake of individualism and instant gratification. This is what you do with your phone. He furthered this construct as the technological and religious industrial complex engineered after World War II. I want to warn us first of the act of disobedience as we look at the life of Moses. He had a wooden rod. Remember the wooden rod that symbolized the power of God in the acts of Exodus in Israel for 40 years in the desert. This wooden rod allowed him to protect himself. It was a technology of the time, from attackers, from predators, from thieves. It also served him to herd sheep and cattle and other activities such as God's ordained miracles and wonders. On one occasion, while in the desert, you know the story, Moses heard God's word saying in Numbers 20, directed him to command and speak to the rock. And you know the rest of the story. to bring forth water so that the people of Israel may drink and survive. In his dependency on this wooden stick, he wielded power and hit the rock with the wooden rod. Moses missed the rest of the story, didn't enter the promised land. Technology in the hands of man, I'm saying man, males, like Moses, instilling him to act deliberately in omission to God's command. Second, because of the neutrality of technologies, these can be transformed by God's people who listen and obey the Spirit. And that is, my sisters and brothers, that we need to go and engage in conversation and engage in informed critique to what we understand, what we hear people saying about technology and how we can engage it in more constructive ways. Christian witness in this technological era must behold and tell, as we have heard, of the life worth living. In a community of pilgrims, as we are, we heard that this morning by Dr. Kim. For instance, swords designed for battle, you know the story, the passage in Isaiah, became the object for change into tools for cultivating, for life-giving for the people. Isaiah, the prophet, spoke, they will beat their swords into iron plows and their spears into pruning tools. And it's exactly the same verse in Micah 4:3. Such a transformative deed, which the people of God, with a concern for a viable witness, could ignite, and we should do likewise. There is nothing more lethal than weapons of instrument or instruments to cause death in wars or on the streets and neighborhoods of America today. I want to speak of a ministry that has become a prophetic voice to the gun violence crisis in our society today. Raw Tools is a ministry of the Mennonite Church USA, whose mission is to follow the transformation of guns into tools for gardening and fomenting life. You could imagine the pushback and support of this ministry in the complex political and religious we all face in this issue and controversial topic of gun control. This ministry is out of Colorado Springs, the North American Mecca of the US. And I want to end, and I want to keep you awake. I know it's the last one. Pop culture and the challenge of vulnerability. I would recommend to read Always On, because it speaks a lot of the heart of a scholar who has a passion for the church to engage technology in good ways, in constructive ways. So you must read it. I want to provide a hopeful perspective as a way to flesh out, to embody our experience, what we have heard for a day and a half. And Dr. Gorrell, the vulnerability paralyzes the human heart. She presents in the book. By the way humans respond, there could be difference in what we do. Andrew Walls proposed that Christianity, I quote, has vulnerability in its very heart. Christianity has vulnerability at its very heart, fragility in its expression. What we have heard concerning transhumanism, its synonyms of Human 2.0, Humanity Plus, questions our human aversion to vulnerability. Vulnerability derives from God's unique display of power in his salvific work for humanity. The incarnation and the cross are evidence of such powerless power. We read in Ecclesiastes 1:9, there is nothing new under the sun. And by that I mean that this topic of envisioning life without suffering, powerlessness, and death long resides deep within the human heart. Let us think about pop culture through the lenses of the entertainment industry. Written comics, as early as 1941, a character personified immortality, heroics, and the very essence of a white male, Captain America. If you are a nerd like me, you've probably already seen all the movies. Captain America saving the world and the country. Before that, Superman came out in 1936. Wouldn't this be a perfect picture of the idealized immortal male syndrome? I wouldn't want to go after the superhero films have produced in this particular genre in the past 11 years. 11 years of movies of that genre. It somewhat shows the hunger and need for transcendence. If you recall, For instance, the Marvel Cinematic Universe promotes the idea of transhumanism in its narrative to a younger audience that soaks every fictional line. You know what I mean by that? You've probably seen all the movies more than one time. How many say, yeah, I have done? Think for a moment about the implications of such narrative for our Generation Z and Generation Alpha. And I end with this. His life depended on technology to survive by keeping his heart from hurting by a residue from an explosion blast he experienced. From this circumstance, a new way of living emerged. Extending his life, he designed an iron suit that contained the necessary subatomic voltage to keep his heart from damaging. By this moment, you probably may guess who I'm referring here. The legendary hero of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who's that? Iron Man and his alter ego, Tony Stark. The superhero comics our parents read, today's blockbuster movies that teenagers love and watch over and over. I have one teenager at home that watches it over and over with their friends. Motion pictures speak loudly of the inherent desire to beat death, suffering, and loss. Human beings in disrupted experiences of life becomes sheroes and heroes. Sheroes and heroes to make a difference in their context. I hope you all got that. I would like to metaphorically allude to the theme of the good life of flourishing humans about superheroes in pop culture. In The Denial of Death, Ernest Becker reminds us that we humans could not admit the finitude of our existence. The avoidance of suffering, pain, and loss soothes the soul of generations of men and women in Western society through the use of technology's devices. These sustain and distract us from what is out of our control. The inherent capacity for creativity and resilience is endless and divinely given. Suffering moves the human soul into paths of resilience unparalleled to other species. It is in this space of suffering, relationally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that inserts human existence into technological habitats where creativity becomes fertile and expansive. This is what I've gathered from Dr. Gorrell's presentation, a promise of a better life and new spaces where human suffering finds new environments of men and women who encounter the potential of thriving, new ways to connect and become network communities of grace and hope. In the metaphor of the Iron Man character, I find two motifs: survival and thriving. The male character began as a self-absorbed, chauvinistic, immature individual. Through brilliant and full of knowledge that he possessed, in every other movie you notice his character perfected his protective suit for survival. He added a new advancement to the iron suit. Tony Stark seemed obsessed and addicted to improving its suit's technology and thus his heroic prowess. Although there are few malfunctions and needed improvements, through time, the protective armor and life sustainability got better. While he became better at surviving his physical predicament, there was a broadening in his soul, a thriving within him. And that's what I capture in a metaphor of this movie. His vulnerability and care for others led him to die as a martyr. I'm sorry that I ruined the movie, but go watch it. As a martyr for the sake of his friends at the end of the Avengers saga. What a powerful analogy to summarize what we have heard about being Christian witnesses in this technological era. Thank you, Dr. Gorrell. Thank you for assisting us in reflecting on the significance of engaging this issue of transhumanism as we embrace our own mortality, technology, and the relevancy of our Christian witness as Techno-Sapiens. May we envision a faithful witness in this technological era, committed to bringing human flourishing and resilience to others inclusively and holistically. Your presentation will open pathways for Christian witness to see the future and potential of technology as a lighthouse to a life worth living and the advent of something new in the promise of Christ's return. I found it appropriate to close my response by sharing this assertion from Dr. Jürgen Moltmann. In his book, Spirit of Life, I end up, quote, "The person who accepts his or her own suffering and does not try to repress it or push it away shows the power of hope." Thank you.